presenters today, and I'll be joined today by Dave Detweiler, our VP of Customer Solutions. Our agenda today will start with a very high-level look at food safety and quality assurance compliance challenges and the technology innovations that are available today to help you deal with those challenges of compliance. We'll then look at all of the different categories of return on investment along the three major components of the supply chain, which Dave will go through with you. We'll give you some scenarios and then calculate for you the kinds of savings that can be achieved with these types of technologies. We're then going to give you a very brief overview of our SafetyChain for food, one of the many first-in-class technologies available today. We'll then take your questions and tell you how you can get your own custom calculation for your company's specific needs. Before we begin our presentation, let me give you just a few housekeeping notes. Everybody will be able to get the slides and the recording of today's event within the next 24 hours. You'll get an email. There's also, I believe, a form that will pop up. It wasn't working the other day, but it should pop up at the end of this event. You'll be able to download the slide and recording. If you don't see that, don't worry. All of you will get the email. Right now, you can enter questions. We're going to take questions at the end of the presentations, but if you go to the Q&A button on the drop-down bar, you can enter your question, hit send, and that way we'll have it up at the end. If you're having trouble, if you are listening in on speakers and you're not getting the audio quality that you like, you can call into the number that was provided in your email confirmation. And with that, let's go on to look at FSQA compliance challenges. And really, as I said, obviously in a 5-minute event, we're looking at this from the very big picture. But compliance is expensive. And when there's any non-compliant event, it's very, very expensive. Withdrawals, rejections, recall cost the food industry $7 billion annually. This is everything from having to remove goods from shelves and replace them, lawsuits, lost customers and sales, public relations repair, and much more. Those are really the key categories. And the liability is spreading everywhere today. There's been a lot, as you know, of public awareness of some of the worst of these events. And when we look at the cost of liability, it's really now going to be touching anybody and everybody that touches any part of the food supply chain, whether it's the suppliers, the manufacturers, the distributors, whether you are a retail or services seller, third-party labs, and even auditors. We were at the Food Safety Tech Conference a few weeks ago in Schaumburg, and there was a lot of lively discussion about how criminal prosecution in this area is going to step up, which means compliance is even a bigger challenge. And I have not met a single person, and I've been out there talking to a lot of FSQA folks recently, who told me that they're getting a lot more staff to help with all of these challenges. Everybody is having to do more and more with fewer resources, or even the same number of resources are still stretched very, very thin. So the challenge really becomes, how do I meet my regulatory, my non-regulatory, and my customer-driven requirements while getting product out on time, while remaining competitive, and while remaining profitable? The answer points to technology. And technology is not new in the food and beverage industry. There have been a lot of past investments in technology. Now, they've been mainly focused on the manufacturing and the logistics, supply chain systems, distribution, procurement, solutions like that. And there was a good business case for those kinds of solutions. They saved time, they saved money, and they created efficiencies. Well, many of the technology innovations that are available today, and there's new ones every day, are really focused now on making sure that compliance is met throughout the supply chain. They're really focused on prevention, keeping non-compliant products from coming in or going out in the first place. They are meant to create efficiencies in getting safety and quality data to the right people during the supply chain and create more efficiencies there. And the ability, if something that is not in compliance does get out, to be able to react quickly and track and trace it back. Well, these solutions have the same exact business case, and Dave's going to really walk you through a lot of the detail here. They save time, they save money, and they create efficiencies when it comes to safety and quality compliance. There's 5 general areas when it comes to the return on investment, the categories really, and the challenges that you have. These are the categories that we'll drill down into to show where safety and quality technologies not only save you time, save you money, but actually provide a bottom line or dollar return. These come in the area of time and labor. They come in the area of reporting and analysis, materials, compliance risk mitigation, and when you have to go out and withdraw a product from a client's shelves, when you have a client reject product, and of course, in the worst case scenarios, the recalls that we all have to deal with. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave, who will go through the various ROI categories that are the drill downs of those 5 sort of general categories. And we'll present some scenarios to you and give you some sample ROI calculations. And again, at the end, we'll tell you how you can have a custom calculation. And with that, Dave, if you hold on for one moment here, I am giving you the presenter ball, and you should be able to show your slides and calculator now.
Thank you so much, Barbara, and thanks everybody for joining today. This is a great conversation that we have with so many different organizations, and obviously it's so important, right? We're not out in the market looking just to invest in the latest and greatest. We want to show bottom line value to the organization. And hopefully, with a little bit of time here today, we can walk through some of those value propositions and, as Barbara mentioned, the actual return on investments in these scenarios and categories. I have a couple components to the presentation today. We'll have a couple slides, we'll outline a couple scenarios, and we'll actually then dive directly into a calculator, basically an Excel spreadsheet that we've put together to start to capture this type of information. And the first piece that we're going to start on is that inbound side. So in many organizations, as I can see on the phone here today, you have many different suppliers, could be hundreds. You might have many different types of documents that you're tracking per supplier. We talk about things like third-party audit documents and certificates of insurance and allergen declarations and things like that you might be tracking at a supplier level. The real thing that we hear so much about, right, is that you have this mountain of paperwork, as you can see in the graphic there on the page, right? But the fact of the matter is, out of that whole mountain, probably less than 5% of that actually needs some type of action. So now you're reviewing that mountain over and over again just to get to that 5% piece of actionable data. And when we talk about this ROI, you'll see very quickly, a lot of that is just manual time spent, right? And I know I have some FSQA folks, actually the majority of the folks on the call here are, food safety professionals and so forth, but understand that there are many people in your organization that are touching this type of information. For example, you'll see there on this slide, if you are receiving certificates of analysis, COAs, incoming into your organization, the concept is that might not be a food safety professional reviewing that COA, right? That might be a person actually at the dock, right? Receiving those goods and shipping and receiving, who's actually pulling it in and validating this information. So as we talk about the return on investment, you're going to see it outlined in a couple different ways, both dollars and hours associated. But what I would ask is, as you look at this, understand that it's not just the individuals on the phone. This is affecting a lot of people in your organization. I had the opportunity to talk to a company earlier this week, where they have some administrators just simply doing these type of tasks. They're not food safety professionals, and it runs the gamut through the organization. But these are some typical bullet points or challenges that you'll see from an inbound standpoint, validation of these documents and so forth. If we look at a specific scenario, so two sides to this slide that you're seeing here. One is the major time and money categories. And what do you see here, right? There are things that you need to do. You're tracking supplier compliance. You're tracking supplier documents. You're tracking certificates of analysis, maybe even doing the validation of those certificates of analysis, right? And then many of you on the phone have supplier contractual terms, right? And I'd ask the question, do you have enough data to even present back to these suppliers in regard to the contract that's in place today? So many of them have performance guarantees and quality guarantees. Do you have enough information? Have you aggregated enough data to actually go back to your suppliers and be a very knowledgeable customer of that supplier and say, hey, by the way, here's what we're seeing from a trend standpoint. So let's take a look at an actual scenario, right? The scenario we keyed up here today, and it's going to be consistent throughout the three areas of our presentation. From an inbound standpoint, we put in an organization that's about $250 million in sales. They have about 1,200 products, 200 suppliers, and 12 FSQA professionals. The potential savings is obviously big, and that's why we put it here on the slide. I also understand that many of you sitting on this phone will say, well, that's not completely applicable, Dave. I'm a $100 million company, or I'm a $50 million company, or I'm a $1 billion company, right? And it's obviously going to change some of these results, but what we're hoping to do here is give you that general baseline of things that you can save on, and it'll be around hours and materials. You see the term scorecards here. It's a very popular trend today for you as that customer to be able to scorecard your suppliers, right? And that ability then to go back and possibly receive adjustments or credits. So this is the actual scenario, and I'm going to pull out of this and pull up this actual spreadsheet here. And there's several different tabs that run across the baseline of the calculator. But I'm going to start here on key assumptions, again, just reiterating the scenario that we put into place. And now if you look at the details of this, okay, so let's look at this inbound tab here and look at a couple of these components, okay? And again, I understand that these numbers may differ, and that's why we've made this calculator have the ability to change. We're not here to say there's a blanket statement and that every organization on here is going to save $500,000. But if I could tell you that you could save $100,000 a year or reduce the ability for you to have to hire another FTE, I think that might be quite compelling. So please take that as this. This is a good generic example, and we'll walk through a couple of these components, right? You have supplier and ingredient document management. Well, what goes into that, right? You have to think about the number of suppliers that you would have, possibly the number of documents that you're being asked to track by supplier, or as you'll see here, even the number of ingredients that you have, and the number of suppliers per ingredient, as well as documents per ingredient. This number adds up very quickly. And I know many of you sitting on the phone are going, yep, and I'm using a tool very similar to what I'm looking at today, an Excel spreadsheet to track this, of which I have to then manually go through, filter, sort, to find out what due, and then I also have to go find the document, right? So it's not just the tracking of it, it's also then that housing and that storing, so that reporting of it, right, that needs to go on. And you'll see here in this example, right, we walk through several things. So we have the number of suppliers. As I mentioned, the number of documents that would go into it. How much time do you actually spend to document, track, scan, upload, house, store, whatever it might be? What do those hours look like, right? And as we look through this, you'll see many times in these scenarios, we're going to look at different items like hourly rate. I know that's going to vary, and that's great that it's going to vary. We'd want to use your specific numbers in these scenarios so it becomes compelling to the organization. The percent reduction, right? I'm going to say that there's a 70% reduction if you can actually automate this process. If you can have your suppliers provide the documents without you having to touch them, to have a system that could automatically notify or alert you if there's expirations coming up, so you don't have to continually go through this process of manually reviewing the data, right? So very quickly, we've come up with the number of suppliers, as you're seeing here, the documents per supplier, right? Maybe number of ingredients. Again, all configurable numbers, but in this specific scenario, as we walk through it, you're coming up with a pretty handy cost savings here. And this is just based on hourly labor rate. Now, I mentioned earlier that return on investment, business cases, we talked to so many organizations today, and Barbara alluded to this. You're very lean today, right? You're not sitting around with a whole bunch of people just wondering what to do. You're operating very lean today. So there's a great other component. It's not just dollar savings, as you're seeing here on the screen. It's also labor hours associated with those dollars. And it can be shown in multiple different ways, right? But these are kind of the two most common that we hear from organizations. Hey, if you can tell me that I could save, 2,000 hours in a year, what do you think I could get done? It's oftentimes we talk to food safety and quality professionals who truly today, the majority of their job is data entry and reporting, right? That's not a food safety quality professional, right, that's doing these tasks. So I won't belabor each and every one of these points, but I am going to scroll down through those specific areas to show you some of the other things to think about as you're building out these business cases and things that we'll take into consideration. You have supplier compliance, audit management, and corrective actions. You're tracking these, right? Something happens, you're tracking a corrective action today, and then you're following up on that corrective action, and then you're communicating that corrective action, and then you're storing that corrective action. So the concept here is I have, again, 200 suppliers. How much time am I actually spending? And that'll vary, right? Some organizations that we talk to say, well, I don't spend as much time in this area, but I do spend a lot of time tracking those documents, right? So you need a tool as you create these business cases and these return on investment models that's very flexible. Our leadership teams today aren't just going to take some vague, hoopla around a big number, and we know that. So these are some of the things to take into consideration, right? Supplier compliance, audit management, corrective action requests. How many hours are actually spent again, right? What's that quality hourly labor rate? And when you talk about labor rates, you want to take into consideration a fully loaded employee, right? Not just their annual salary, but what's it cost around benefits, right? What's that fully loaded employee actually cost? And you're seeing some great examples here within our calculation. As I scroll down through the document, you'll see another area. And this doesn't always come up. I know that some of you, as I can see here on the phone, might not be receiving certificates of analysis. That's fine, right? We'll zero out this area. But others of you are, and I again, from an attendee list, I can see that some of you definitely are. Each of those COAs come in. Who's validating them? Who's receiving them? Where are they being stored? And can you imagine that as you go through hundreds of these in a week or in a day, depending on the size of your organization, that manual review of this data. So not only the idea of receiving the COAs and the time spent, but as Barbara mentioned, there's another side of this business, this business case, which is the quality of that work done. And I'm not suggesting that your food safety quality folks aren't doing a great job, because they are. But I think all of us could admit that if we're looking at 100 documents a day, every once in a while one might slip through the cracks. The thought or the ability to actually automate this process comes in very handy, right? So we have a number of quality or receiver full-time, involved in receiving COAs. And as I mentioned earlier, remember, this might not just be FSQA individuals. This could be your shipping and receiving folks. And the ability to automate this process, then, as you can see, can very quickly add up and show that return on investment or that business case. Again, using percentages in here, for a flexible comparison. Many folks will say, well, it's probably not going to eliminate 70%. Let's change that down to 50 or even 30%. And I can assure you, you'll still see an ROI or a business case associated with this type of technology. The last piece, as we mentioned on this inbound side, and I'll scroll down here to the bottom, for the totals. But the last piece is around that supplier contract adjustment. This is a good area to focus on. I know many of you on the call would say, well, does that really count? And that's why we made some flexible assumptions in here that you can put in your own assumption specific for an organization. But in this example, we're saying that 40% of the material is total sales revenue, and that's just how we're getting our calculation. You might have a more accurate number to that. But the concept is, and the question again that I would ask, as I did earlier, is you have enough data today to confirm those contracts that you have with your suppliers providing you those goods. So the tail end here, as I've scrolled down through each of these and we've kind of hit on each of the bullet points, the tail end here is that there are a whole lot of hours, right? 9,000 hours saved, with the ability to automate in this specific scenario. Almost $500,000, a little over $500,000 if you put a dollar number to those hours or time spent or material, right, as you're seeing here. So as we scroll down through here, you saw many different areas. You saw material and labor and time and hours and so forth. But those are some of the areas that we focus on from an inbound standpoint. Let's move along, and I spent the most time here on the inbound side just to get you familiar with the calculator. We'll walk through the other two scenarios here, and we'll do those a little bit quicker just to keep up with the time and so forth on the webinar here. But when you look at the production side, that internal side, that manufacturing house that you're going through, right, some of the challenges that we've heard, and again, this isn't an all-encompassing list, I know that, but the fact of the matter is these are most likely some areas that you're focusing on today, right? You have a lot of people walking around with a pen and paper. You're capturing data. You're collecting information. You're tracking third-party tests. You have different specifications and release checklists that you're checking against as you go through it. Many times we've heard in organizations this is done on spreadsheets today. And not only that, back to that 5% of information. You're reviewing all of that data to find some actionable information. And then you combine that together with, Excel is a wonderful tool, and Microsoft's done a great job with it. But I'm sure that many of you on this phone spend time within Excel trying to create management-type reports or reports up through your organization. And that time spent is just, you have a lot better things to do in your professional day-to-day life than creating these reports. I hear so often, especially from directors and managers of FSQA teams, that they're just inundated with data, right? What do I do with all this data, and where does it go? So these are some of the challenges that we see. From an ROI standpoint, you'll see, again, very similar to the first example. On the left side, you'll see the major time and money categories that we're associating with this business case and with this ROI. Everything through audit prep reduction, right? We're all getting ready for the prom and getting ready for our audits and customer audits that come in, up through, quality enhancements, quality improvements, yield improvements, the ability to, possibly eliminate retesting that might be done from your internal or your external laboratories. And again, let's all just get out of the manual paper processing business, right? I mean, it's 2012. I think there are a lot of great tools out there that we can, change the way that we all do business and make some of this data actionable. So on the right side of your screen, you're seeing, again, that very similar scenario. The one thing that we did add here was an internal lab component or external lab component, however you want to view it, where you're doing certain tests, but a very similar scenario. You'll see the potential annual savings here and the areas that are associated with those savings. So if we pull back, so I'm going to pull back here to the calculator again, and let's look at that specific tab, that production tab. So when we look at that, we'll go through again, very similar to that inbound layout. You have audit reduction, where we're looking at the number of quality full-time employees that are supporting audits today, right? And how much of a percent reduction in time can you have if you're continually checking this information rather than just doing it spot checks or, on occasion you're checking out this information. So you have the data and the information around hourly rates, the cost of actually what it's taking you to do these type of things, the hours associated with it from an average standpoint, and you'll see an end result game here of not only dollars again, but labor hours are saved. Okay. As we scroll down, there are many areas in here, and I won't scroll so quickly just so you can take it all in as we go through. But obviously data collation, right, an analysis effort. What do you do? How do we pull it together? I hear it so often from folks sitting in similar seats. You say, yeah, I actually do have a lot of this data. It lives in paper or in a filing cabinet, and then I have someone keying it into a spreadsheet, and then we're creating reports. And, what goes into that when I create out a good report? Both internally to provide to the organization or externally, right, to your customers and so forth that you need to provide this information for. So you'll see as we go through this, this spreadsheet, again, we're taking into consideration FTEs that may be involved, the quality hourly rate, average hours spent per year, right? And again, that percent reduction, a configurable percent of reduction, but we put it in here at 65%, and you'll see that returns in to about $156,000 savings with a little over 4,500 hours a year. As you go through here, you'll see product release reviews. Many times these type of solutions that we're talking about today, you have a hold and release type program where you have to capture all of your data together, and then someone reviews it, and then someone releases it. You imagine if that could be automated, right? There's time spent there. There's hours spent. Again, we're focusing here on the labor time spent and labor hours spent around it. And as we walk through, you'll see, an average hours spent by that FTE, the percent of reduction here at 80%, and we come up with a $96,000 value of that return on investment, or just being able to eliminate some of those manual processes and programs. Continuing to scroll down, quality and continuous improvements, right? Yield improvement might be simple, right? Maybe it's only a 0.05% yield improvement. It could be less than that, right? But the concept is if we can just affect it in one minute little area, it's going to make you more efficient. It's going to make you, better as an organization. And that's the concept behind these business cases and these ROIs, that ability to take something that maybe not doesn't have to be a core competency, right? As I continue to scroll down here on the production side, you have internal and external lab test management. The thought of, receiving paper back from laboratories today or reports back today, wouldn't it be much simpler to actually automate that process? Receive the data back into a solution, be notified if something's outside of specification, but at the same time, still have that repository to report off of, as we mentioned earlier, to drive that reporting. So you have average number of lab tests run per month, time spent sending, tracking, reviewing lab test results, right? I know many of you might look at that and say, well, sending, I'm still going to package up the sample and send it to an external vendor. For sure. But are there manual steps that go into sending that process? Or maybe we reduce this down, right, from a 0.5 hours to something less than that. And that's very fair, and you can do that within here. And you'll see that very quickly you can come back with some cost savings as well as labor savings associated with it. Right in line with that internal and external testing, full test reduction, and we continue to move through this production side, right? You'll see up top here, production data collection improvement. How many of you on the phone today, right, have people walking through the facility with a pen and a piece of paper, and you ask them to key in the information, as we mentioned earlier? Just simply manual paper processing. Again, notice what's going into this. FTEs, and this is around the labor cost again, right? Just a clerical hourly rate. As I mentioned, it's not just FSQA folks involved with this. There are people across the organization that are supporting you to do these types of things, and that's obviously very important to take into consideration as you go through it. And that's how we would come up with that number that you saw originally on the slide of just over $500,000. So I think, again, as you end here at the tail end of this, the ability for someone to come in and say, hey, I could save you, split it in half, 7,500 hours a year, right? You take the whole ROI, take the business case, split it in half as you come up with these. And I think the numbers are still quite compelling from an organization standpoint. So we'll look at one more of these before I hand it back to Barbara. And we'll look at that outbound side. So, we talked about inbound, things coming into the organization, compliance around that. We talked about production, and now we'll talk about those outbound challenges. You have validation of customer specification, customer reporting, customer audits to come in. Never mind product withdrawals, quality and safety reporting that you're being required to do as a supplier now today, right? Generation of those certificates of analysis and all of those things. And then you'll see some other items there, restocking and reworking of the information. So from an outbound standpoint, again, very similar layout. The major time money categories that go into it: product recall, retrieval, rejection, customer complaint administration, right? And the scenario is exactly the same as we talked about before, right? With the numbers. Now, the one thing that we did actually put in here or add to this scenario, be 2 events per year, whether that's a recall or a rejection from your customer, or possibly a false recall. Again, configurable elements, but thought we should include it in here so you can understand some of the items to think about as you're building out these business cases and calculating out return on investments. So with that, we'll click over here quickly to the last tab of the spreadsheet here, and again, it's going to be very similar, right? Number of events per year. We talked about product withdrawal, recall. Maybe you change that. Maybe it's 0.5, right? Maybe you get one about every 2 years. Maybe it's more often, right? We've talked to some clients who get a product rejection, right, or recall, maybe a little bit more often. So then we have a labor rate that goes into that, average hours spent in that recall analysis. How much time do you actually take to go through this process? And then you have the percent reduction, right? Maybe this percent at 95% you feel is high, then let's reduce it down to 85%, and I guarantee you we'll still come up with a very strong return on investment in business cases you're seeing here, roughly $12,000 and just over 300 hours in a year, right? A couple other examples as you see through here, in that product recall, was labor specific. What about the material associated with that, right? If something's falsely recalled, there's absolutely material associated with that. What's the average cost for a product recall we would take into consideration, right? What's that percentage? Many of you may say, I have this specific information because we've been through it. Some of you say, well, are there industry standards around it or specific verticals that would have this information, and there are, and we can help with that as well. Obviously, you're not seeing hours here associated with this because there wouldn't be hours that go into the material savings. But you'll see a dramatic cost there on the right side of the screen. Product withdrawal, recall, just through reduction of it, right? As we've talked about, outbound customer COA creation. So many of you on the phone, as I mentioned, might be receiving COAs. You also might be producing them outbound. That takes time. I'm sure it does. I know it does. We talk to folks around this. And, how many customers do you have? How many require COAs? Some of them might not even require certificates of analysis today or letters of guarantee. And the ability to provide that or, again, automate that process comes down to true labor savings in this environment. You'll see we put in a time per COA, the quality hourly rate of the people who are actually producing those certificates of analysis, and that comes down to an actual cost savings or labor hours saved. I'll scroll down through the last few items here just, again, to give you the feel of it. I think everybody's probably getting the idea, and I don't need to beat the horse anymore, but customer reporting, administration, running those reports, creating that information, all of these things should be taken into consideration when you look at automating, these processes that you have where there are manual hours going into it today. You have customer complaint administration. I'm sure that many of you on this phone spend time doing this. The ability to automate that and then track those corrective actions and get those results all comes back around to add up very quickly, and you can put a number to it, right? You can put a dollar value to it. You can put hours to it. And those are some of the items that go into it. Again, I understand that this isn't an all-consuming, all-perfect list. This is our idea and what we've heard over the time spent with organizations similar to yourself on the phone. However, we think it's a good start, right? We think it's a great way to get your foot in the door. Every one of our leadership teams are asking for business cases today or return on investments today, and this is a great way to start or give you some items to think about, as we go through it. I'll throw out one more thing before I throw the meeting back over to Barbara. This is an actual business case for a retailer, and this was very simple, by the way. There was an operations checklist, basically, where locally in their stores they had managers going through, store employees going through and just completing forms each day, HACCP-type forms, forms capturing different quality and other associated items. And this is real-life data, right? Data from an organization that has 320 stores. They, how many forms do they do per year? Just about one every day, right? So 360 a year. And when you talk about these numbers, it's just another way to look at it. So the reason I show you this example is not to get into the, the absolute weeds, but I also understand that the model you just saw today, some of those areas are going to be applicable for you, some aren't. And the ability for us to take that information and make it very promising out to management is obviously very important. So with that, hopefully I gave you some good background, and I'm going to kick it back over here to Barbara and have her take it away. Go ahead, Barbara.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave. I'm just trying to now get the ball back and get to our next slide here. Okay, and I'm going to keep this in the smaller screen so that we can, so people can set their questions in right now. Anyhow, what we're going to do just very, very quickly, that's interesting. I'm not sure why it just did that. There we go. Sorry, folks. I'm having a little bit of trouble with our WebEx today. I'm just going to very, very quickly tell you a little bit about SafetyChain for food. Probably just going to really fly through this so we can get to your questions. I mentioned that there are many different kinds of safety and quality compliance software that are out today in first-in-class technologies. We really focus on the prevention side of enforcing safety and quality compliance at all points in the supply chain, really designed to keep non-compliant ingredients and supplies from coming in and non-compliant finished goods from going out. This system can be used all together. It integrates easily with other existing systems that you might have, and it can be used in modules depending on your needs. One of the things that really needs to be pointed out here is technology in this situation is not an extra cost. It actually is helping save money and save time from what you're already doing today. And we know that the sooner that you can catch problems as close to the commodity as possible, that's going to be the most cost effective. The later that problems are found, the more they cost. And this is where technology can really help make a huge difference. We think of SafetyChain management as really like that smoke alarm in the sky. Gets the right information to the right people in the fastest manner possible so that you can proactively prevent problems before they start versus having to go back after something's already gone out that's bad and figure out, how the problem started, trace it back, and how much it's going to cost to repair the damage. So keep that very short and sweet. What we want to do now is take your questions. We've got about 7 minutes till we hit our 45-minute mark. If we have questions, we'll stay on for a few extra minutes. But for those of you that do need to leave, because you are so busy, as we know, that's why we want to try to help save you time. Let me give you some information right now. Again, you will get an email by the end of the day if you don't see the form. Again, we've had WebEx issues. I'm sure the form will pop up. But if you don't see it, the email at the end of the day is going to let you do a few things. You'll be able to automatically download today's recording as well as the slides. If you would like a custom ROI calculation for your company based on your size and how many products and suppliers or customers that you have, in the email you'll be able to request that calculation. We'll set an appointment with you. It takes about 30 minutes, and we'll do that custom calculation with you. It'll also give you some other follow-up opportunities in terms of if you'd like a private demo of the solution. We are doing a demo day for those of you that would like to see what SafetyChain for Food looks at. You can go to our website and register for that. That's taking place on June 28th. And we have a special webinar that we're doing on the quality end. And we're doing that with Quality Assurance Magazine, and that will you can register for that on our website as well. So with that, let's get to the questions. Got a question from Ken, Dave, saying, excuse me, have you captured the longer-term residual impacts of food safety improvements, such as overall market positions, reduced legal costs, preferred status? And I can tell you that anecdotally, yes. We have customers that that had a $1 million rejection, and they have not had that experience since they've started. We hear these anecdotes all the time. Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that one of the other real world examples we have is a client who is actually has gone through this process and is now touting, but not necessarily the residual long term effects. They're actually spinning it around, right? Where they're saying, hey, by the way, we're good at this, and it's something that they're marketing, that they're selling, right? Because they have all of this information. So, are there residual impacts? For sure. But I think that varies industry to industry and the organizations we might talk to. I would tell you the most compelling part that we're seeing is that people who are now starting to automate these processes are using it as a sales tool. They're saying, hey, we're good and we're bulletproof, and because we not only have a great program in place, but now we've automated those programs and we have the data real time, right, in seconds to show you this information. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but we're reacting so much quicker. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great comment and something that we're definitely seeing in the market. Yep.
Yeah, gives the customers more confidence. Another question here is, can you break down overall costs and liability metrics into PERs or typicals, such as prevent, per recall?
Yeah, so we did some of that, and you saw some of it in the calculator, right? Those are obviously it's great information to have, and yes, we can break it down, into any of those components, right? So I think you saw there from a customer standpoint at the tail end, or I should say an outbound standpoint there at the tail end, where we talked about per reject, right, or breaking it down in that fashion, and then you can add those up very quickly. So I think it's a great way to use the calculator. If there are items, and I will say this to the group that's still on the phone here, if there are items that you didn't see on here, obviously it's very easy to add those items, and that's the reason that we did this. Mm-hmm. It's a great starting point for organizations, for sure.
Sure, and that's why that we'll do the custom calculator. We have another question asking if we think that customers using these tools can streamline their auditing requirements. I'll start with that, and that's one of the biggest pains. There's probably nobody on this phone that hasn't had to drop everything and spend days, if not weeks, with everybody basically dropping everything to prepare for audits. The cost of audits and the time that it takes for audits can be extremely improved here. One is, and we can only speak for our system, but all of the information goes into the system directly. Everything is time and date stamped. You can go to a customer with an iPad and basically bring the entire solution there and show them all of the material that you would need in an audit. If you have a government audit, everything is there. Everything is time and date stamped. We've had it suggested to us that the ability to be able to communicate this information to customers can ease the customer expense of having to come and do spot audits. But I think we'll be seeing more of that as we go on. People are going to be getting more audits, and they are going to have to turn to technology, because technology can make you audit ready every day versus what we've seen with some of the folks that we're talking to now. It's one of the reasons that they're talking to us is to have the time and dollars spent on audits dramatically reduced. Don has a question that was sent to me on my chat asking, can you provide an average time to where a system like this would pay for itself and then it turns into the hard dollar savings?
Yeah, absolutely.
Usually,
we have seen when we've done these, typically within the first 12 months of deployment, and that counts, again, as Barbara mentioned, we can't speak for all the other solutions in the market. Our solution will be deployed in months, not years, and you're then seeing that return on investment or that business case come to fruition within the first 12 months. And that's not even of deployment. That could even incorporate in, implementation. So talk about a 2-month, 3-month implementation, whatever it might be, in those next 9 months, you will see that value. Most times, by the way, when you automate a process like this, you're going to see it instantaneously, right? There are several items that we talked about today that the day that it's deployed, you're going to see that result, right? The day that, you get out of the manual paper pushing, that moment, it's instantaneous, but absolutely within the first year for sure.
Mm-hmm. Ken is asking the typical cost of SafetyChain. What we can do, because obviously, costs are going to be different with a lot of variables. One of the things that you can ask on a form, email that you're going to get is to get pricing for your specific organization. But Dave, maybe you want to address, kind of the pricing model.
Yep, it's actually a very simple pricing model, especially specific to our solution. We try to understand the complexity of it. You saw some of the assumptions that went into our ROI calculator today. They're actually taken, we use those in pricing, number of suppliers, size of an organization, number of facilities. Those type of things go into the understanding or scope of the complexity of the project. And then at that point, specific to SafetyChain, you will see one cost for an implementation charge and then an ongoing annual maintenance fee. Those can also be incorporated in to that ROI, right? And that's what we'd love to do, is to be able to incorporate that in and show you how, to the last question I think from Don, how, within that first year you can not only recoup, you can implement a software and actually show value back to the organization within 12 months. So, Barbara, to your point, you're absolutely right. There's not complexity that goes into the pricing, but we need to understand the complexity of the organization to properly price out an organization like this, or differing organizations, and there are 2 fees associated: an implementation cost and then an annual, some people call it subscription fee, right?
Great, thank you. I know that we're a few minutes past the 45-minute mark. I do see a few more questions, so if you've got a few more minutes to stay, Dave and I will hang out for a few more minutes to answer these questions. If you do need to leave us, thank you so much for attending today. We hope to see you online for another SafetyChain event soon. And you can look for the form and or email and to get the slides and the recording. And we'll continue to record as well. So if you have to leave, you can listen to the end of the recording to hear the last couple of questions. With that, we have a few more. And Dave, I'm going to ask you to scroll as well. I've been having some WebEx gremlins, and I'm not sure if I'm seeing everything. But I see one that actually came in a while ago, and I'm just seeing it now, which is from Ken asking, how do you perceive actual risk liability burdens from retail back to the original source compared to the actual causes or sources of the risk? That one's on the bottom.
I see it now too, right? Yeah. How do you perceive actual risk liability burdens, right? There are several different ways to look at it, right, compared to actual causes, sources of the risk. The thought is that if you're capturing all of this data real time, that we're going to hopefully not eliminate, but lower some of that risk, right, or the liability burdens that would happen. Because there is that verification capability within these type of solutions, because there's that ability to actually, then take that risk, hopefully, and again, not fully eliminate it, but cut down those percentages of risk. And we can take those into consideration. A lot of times we don't include those into the calculator, however, Ken, because some people perceive that as being very, very soft, right? We talk to many organizations that say, well, I've been doing it this way for 20 years, and, really my risk hasn't been that high. So the reason that you didn't see that specific scenario today or in our calculator, and we're we've absolutely had it in other calculators, was just because we didn't want to turn anyone off with the idea of, well, we're just out there promoting fear, and this is the only way that, it's going to happen, and now you have to get your management to buy into that fear. But to your point, we absolutely believe that the risk associated or the liability associated will be diminished by using these type of tools, and we would love to add that in the calculator. And like I said, we've had it in some other versions, but there is a soft dollar value to that in a way, and some organizations just don't buy into it, some do. So, in all full transparency, that's why you didn't see it today. Absolutely we can do it, and absolutely we think that these types of solutions will help, maybe not fully eliminate, but at least reduce that risk or liability, for sure.
Right. I see a question from Tina saying, who do you demonstrate the ROI to most? Who are you seeing as key for buy-in? I'll start and then turn it over to you, Dave. Obviously every organization is different, but we certainly this was something else that came out very clear at this conference recently. We've got to get some of the folks, because the food safety and quality folks, you know how much time is being spent. The efficiencies that can be achieved. So, who we're seeing, and we invite you, bring your chief legal counsels, bring your chief financial officers, the folks in purchasing, who maybe are going to say to suppliers, what, here's a tool that's going to save you money, it's going to save us money, it's going to catch problems before anything is contaminated. It's very cost effective. But, you need your purchasing people, right, to work with you on that. So, really, whoever is holding the purse strings is that person who, can very easily see that, just like the manufacturing type technologies create savings and efficiencies, that these have really the same business case and can help everybody do a better job and save money while they're doing it. And so, we invite you to bring those folks along to all of the webinars, because everybody's a stakeholder, really. Dave, you're out on a lot of calls with customers. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that it's perfect, Barbara. Right? I believe the question, Tina, is, we typically need subject matter expertise, folks folks who are participating in this, the managers who understand the true time and labor and quality that's going on. But who we present this back to is 100% that leadership group, because the leadership group typically is holding those purse strings, as Barbara mentioned, and they want to see value, right? We need to show value add back to an organization, and typically that's done most times at the CFO level, as Barbara mentioned, at the chief legal attorney or whoever it might be at that level. Even CIOs we're absolutely seeing involved with this, especially when you talk about hosted type technologies,
sure.
to show that value. So for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at a point that Ken just made about as benefits and metrics continue to build. Does he see a point where you can work with insurance firms to convert into actual cost savings and improve preferred client status? Well, that's certainly our goal here. Our goal, if you think about the good housekeeping seal of approval, our goal is that SafetyChain seal of approval. And if you think about car insurance. People get better rate and they're eligible for better plans when they go for periods of time without accidents. And obviously, we see a point where if you are leveraging all of the technologies in place that can help you prevent problems before they happen, and can help you provide your clients, and in the end, the consumer. I mean, again, the whole farm to fork or plate concept. Yes, we're all for that, and that's what we'll be pushing for. Dave,
we don't want to talk about we don't want to talk about your car insurance rates, Barbara. But yeah, no, absolutely, right. I have
a very good car insurance rate.
It's absolutely the case, and it's definitely a direction that everybody sees is coming. Where when you have access to this type of data, you can report back, and you can do many things in an organization, whether that's additional negotiations with suppliers, whether that's additional negotiations with customers, whether that's additional negotiations with your insurance teams and staff, for sure.
There you go. Unless you see something else that I missed here or I've sold, I think we actually have gotten to all questions. You might want to check in your chat, Dave, because I found a few of them there. But other than that, I think we're done.
Yep. No, I think I've seen them all.
So,
you went from each too.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for all these questions. We love a lively discussion. And we hope to see you on the 20th to take a look at SafetyChain for food. Those of you who are on the quality end, we know that today, obviously there's always a huge focus on safety, but we know that a lot of the ROI comes from the quality and the customer withdrawals and rejections. So we invite you to join us for that event as well. We add new webinars and events all the time, so bookmark our website, and we'll chat with everybody soon. And don't forget to check off that you'd like a private custom calculator. We're happy to provide that for you complimentary. Have a great day, everybody.